Welcome to Paulogia and another edition of Ham and Egg News, where we react to Ken Ham reacting to things. I've been mostly away from YouTube for the month of August, taking a break while simultaneously doing some work on a future series. But Answers News never sleeps. This may become a little rapid fire. As always, check the description for links to the original video in their full context. Let's see what they've been up to, starting with hashtag Arconomics.
These are pictures taken from Saturday because you know what happened on Saturday? We broke our record.
Yeah.
We had over 8,500 people at the Ark.
Congrats, I guess. Everyone achieves a personal best now and then.
The atheists, secular media, they can't stand a Christian organization actually having such success and reaching so many people.
You know, this is nothing new, though. I mean, the secular media, you know, back in the days before Noah, I mean, they really wanted the Ark to fail as well, but it turns out they were all washed up.
Oh, very funny.
Fun fact, the Bible itself doesn't actually tell us that anyone had anything bad to say about the Ark. That's all part of the common fan fiction built up around the Ark story. But Christians really enjoy a good persecution narrative.
This came on the heels of, there are a number of articles, there are some atheist groups and others that they have no idea how everything works at the Ark Encounter. They think they can take some amount of ticket tax we have to pay to Williamstown and work backwards and all that. And I mean, all their assumptions are so flawed.
You may recall that the city of Williamstown, in Grant County, Kentucky, where the Ark Encounter attraction is located, started collecting a 50-cent tax from each ticket sold to a tourist attraction in the area in order to offset the county's increased expenses in emergency services. Since taxes collected are a matter of public record, media like the Grant County News have been regularly reporting on it. Like this recent piece telling us that the county has collected only $374,700 in the past 11 months. It doesn't take much of a math whiz to calculate that at 50 cents per ticket, that the Ark has sold at most 750,000 tickets in that time. This is well short of the 2 million visitor estimates originally made for year 2 of the Ark, and even the 1 million visitor revised numbers. At a clear 50 cents per ticket tax rate, I'm not sure what false assumptions the press could be making, unless the Ark Encounter is admitting that they are underpaying their taxes.
Numbers have been climbing ever since we opened. They actually, I'm sort of pleased those articles, even though they had stupid headlines. Yeah. And Fortune magazine, I mean, Fortune magazine, their article was irresponsible journalism. Yeah, that's all you can call it. Irresponsible journalism.
Here's the Fortune article Ken refers to. It basically lays out the same tax source and ticket calculation I spoke of, but with a dramatic headline in a high-profile publication. Again, Ken, why don't you tell us what the flaws are with the article? This is your chance to set the record straight.
I love the fact that we now have a term that has become so popularized, people know what we mean every time we say it. Fake news.
Okay, so don't provide any refutation. Just wave your hands and call it fake news. You're becoming more American all the time, Ken.
The good thing is there's publicity, and the more people see that, and we can show people photographs and so on and what's really going on.
Photographs of the attraction on what you self-report to be your best day ever isn't exactly transparently showing us the trend. You're holding up one data point and pretending it's representative, though that is consistent with Answers Research Journal scientific methodology. It's worth noting that since this broadcast, the July numbers for the Ark have come out. And no surprise, July 2018 is lower attendance than July 2017.
Somebody else said here, I just listened to an atheist podcast. What are you listening to an atheist podcast for? On your numbers, I just had to laugh at these hateful individuals. Yeah, they are hateful. But anyway, praise the Lord that they're responding because it means they're taking notice of us.
Right, yeah.
So, and they give us more and more publicity.
You're welcome.
Lab-made fossils cram thousands of years into 24 hours. So, this is a really interesting article talking about how they, in a lab, they've been basically able to mimic what happens in nature over supposedly millions of years. They've been able to do it in 24 hours.
The article is referring to this recent paper outlining a new process of recreating certain types of fossils in a laboratory setting by packing biomaterial between thin clay plates and subjecting it to intense heat and pressure conditions for a day.
So what does that tell you about?
It tells you it doesn't take millions of years.
Yeah. And all it takes is the right conditions. Right?
I just used logic.
When I first heard of this paper, I immediately thought of the creationist response. Science has now proven that it doesn't take millions of years to make a fossil. Mark my words, this paper is going to be misquoted at dinosaur soft tissue levels in the coming months and years. Part of me would be excited if this paper could replace some of the claims that there are fossilized hats and hammers and teddy bears, items that have simply been coated with minerals and allowed to harden, rather than being the kind of fossils most people think of. Bones of ancient creatures where the minerals have actually replaced the biological material. Part of the problem is that the word fossil is actually a general term that applies to any type of physical trace of a prehistoric organism. This includes the popular common perception of permineralized fossils where the rock has taken the shape of the plant or animal, or the Jurassic Park trendy biological material cased in amber or similar substance, but equally so, mere impressions of an animal leaving a negative image of the organism, and even trace fossils like preserved nests or footprints. All of these things are considered fossils. So what has this lab achieved? Well, it turns out the procedure reproduces something known as the unfortunately ambiguously named exceptional fossils. While the general public will undoubtedly think this is merely referring to fossils of high quality, in paleontology, this exceptional fossil phrase has a more precise meaning, and is often described with its German name, Lagerstätten, where a fossil deposit preserves an impression of the skin, hairs, feathers, and articulated skeleton in fine detail. This is the kind of fossil that can now be created in a lab. For a more detailed and very cool description of Lagerstätten fossils, check out John Perry of Stated Casualty's appearance on Ham and Egg News earlier this year.
But you know what the secularists say, the evolutionists say? Wow, we can do in a laboratory in hours what it takes nature millions of years to do.
Yeah,
Which means it doesn't take millions of years.
While this ambiguously described fossil-in-a-day research may seem like a bow-wrapped gift to the young Earth creation cause, it could also come back to bite them. This paper touches on quite a number of areas where this technique might be able to help scientists predict and identify preservation of feather traces in dinosaur finds. We know that AiG doesn't want to find more feathered dinosaurs, and also enable possible observational and testable affirmations of mechanisms for preservation of soft tissue over millions of years. To be clear, the types of permineralized bone we're used to seeing in large dinosaur fossils are not the type we can now create in a day. This won't be the last time we talk about this one.
All right, let's go on to the next one.
Canadian expansion sparks pro-LGBTQ.
Hey, now wait a minute.
So when I saw this one, I said to my husband, I was like, Chick-fil-A's coming to Canada. We can just move back. There's no reason to stay here anymore. Bye, Kentucky.
So when they announced Chick-fil-A's coming to Canada,
We're going to Toronto.
here's a typical tweet. Just a friendly Canadian reminder, we are a progressive country and have morals and fight for equal rights for all. We don't want your bigoted, discriminatory business opening anywhere north of the border.
I'm going to set aside the panel's talking points for a minute here and address this Chris Lots of Toronto. That was completely obvious without looking. Here's my little reminder, and something that people from Ontario seem to have trouble grasping. Toronto is not synonymous with Canada. Canada is a massive country, and while I know you're not aware of it, things happen in Canada that are not in Toronto. Chick-fil-A has had a location open in the Calgary airport since May. I walked past it myself yesterday. This is approximately as busy as I've ever seen it. The Fox News article accurately reported that the expansion would be into Toronto for the first time. You, Chris, decided that meant the same thing as first time into Canada. The Maple Leafs are never going to win the cup because of people like you.
And they said, we want freedom and tolerance. Wait a minute. What did you... I mean, freedom and tolerance for you, but not for me.
Right, yeah.
As a Christian.
What the tweet called for was equal rights. If anyone called for a Christian to have fewer rights than others, say in marrying whom you choose, then you'd have something. The call is for a boycott, not for any agency to prevent Chick-fil-A from operating its business.
They're saying they're bigoted and they're intolerant and full of hate speech and all the rest of it when the business is selling chicken.
It is a business selling chicken, but the owners of the business use the profits of the business to fund anti-gay marriage lobbies and conversion therapy groups. By giving the business money, you're giving the owners money, and indirectly funding these anti-gay groups. You can imagine how some might not want to do that. Voting with one's wallet is one of the most effective things an average citizen can do.
Air Force Base replaces Bible with generic book of faith. And this is about the missing man table that they have, which is basically symbolic of those that have either been prisoners of war or are missing in action. Now, and this has happened several other places where the Bible has been replaced by a generic book of faith.
And you know, the organization that's doing this is called Military Religious Freedom Foundation, MRFF, and it's really the same sort of organization as the Freedom from Religion Foundation based in Wisconsin, which is nothing but a Christian hate group. It's a group of atheists that threaten to sue anyone and everything if there's anything associated at all with Christianity or the Bible.
According to the very article Ken is citing, 19 of the 31 of the military members who complained about the book profess to be Christians. Unless all of these people are self-hating, the motive for this isn't hatred or even a single religion. The point is, the military is a group with diverse faiths who look to many different books for comfort. and the government is not to endorse any one faith over another, particularly in a memorial for fallen servicemen.
She's also going to include a bunch of blank pages for those who find solace in nothing. I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a blank page right now. I'm getting a vibe.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, the vibe is nothing.
Do you get that nothing vibe a lot, Ken?
With that generic book of faith, what they're doing, again, they're imposing their atheism on the culture, right? And what they're saying is Christians can't have their book.
Keeping government activity religiously neutral isn't imposing atheism. If someone came to your home and said you couldn't have a Bible, then you'd have a case. A generic book of faith as a prop in a display is hardly imposed atheism. Epistivists, like Aaron Ra, reject any position held by faith, so might be equally offended by this compromise as any book.
Supergirl cast first transgender superhero on television. So
Wait a minute, I want to know something. Is that a girl or a boy? That
it
picture?
actually is a boy. So this is a man who has who identifies and dresses as a woman, and he goes by the name Nicole Maines.
Here's a quote from the article. It seems only fitting that we have a trans superhero for trans kids to look up to. I tell you what, here's an idea. How about Hollywood produce a superhero movie with a Christian so kids can look up to a Christian? Would they do that?
Yeah.
You know?
They wouldn't. There's no way.
They
No,
wouldn't.
they're not going to do that, are they?
They're not going to do that? May I point to Captain America?
There's only one God, man. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that.
Daredevil?
I'm asking forgiveness for what I'm about to do.
That's not how this works.
Nightcrawler?
Perhaps he is testing me.
Though those last two are Catholic, which Ken may not consider Christian. Then there's Superman, the alien-raised Protestant, but still on screen, goes to visit a pastor in a church when considering a moral dilemma.
Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith first. The trust part comes later.
Were you thinking of something more overt? Like Arkman?
Someone special visited Texas. They call him the Arkman.
The Arkman.
They called me the Arkman. I've never been called the Arkman before. You know, so
That's funny.
Maybe we could have it. Maybe we have one of these superhero TV programs, the Arkman.
Arkman has the power to sell great quantities of books, DVDs, and theme attraction tickets that tell you how to interpret a book you already own and could read on your own.
It's really this very vocal minority because if you look at the percentages of transgender people, they're extremely low in comparison to the whole population. So how many people watching this can even relate to who this is?
Right.
This is becoming an increasingly frequent tact for Answers News, justifying their opposition to human rights by highlighting that the Christians are the numerical majority and the oppressed are in the minority, and should stay that way. By Georgia's logic, there shouldn't be characters on TV who are left-handed, shouldn't be characters who are descended from indigenous people, shouldn't be characters who have disabilities. Only the majority should be represented. If that's a Christian view, then maybe Captain America isn't a Christian after all.
This is why you were chosen. Because a strong man who has known power all his life may lose respect for that power. But a weak man knows the value of strength and knows compassion.
Maybe Ken should heed the words of Jesus. Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me.
Yeah, Ruby Rose set to star as lesbian superhero Batwoman for the CWs. Once again, why can't superheroes just be superheroes? Why do they have to be involved in all this political?
Political? My kids watch most of the Arrowverse shows, and they don't talk about politics, other than when Oliver Queen became mayor of fictional Star City. Oh, unless you mean that gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and any religious view other than Christianity is political. And that's exactly what you mean.
Look at where the world's going. This stuff is getting so terrible.
And it's going to be focused on the gay issue because it even says the whole show's going to start out with her being in a U.S. military academy, but despite being an exemplary student, she was dismissed from the school for being gay. So that's going to be the whole basis. It's not going to be about superheroes.
It's not like they invented that story for the show. That's the exact backstory from the Batwoman comics, established back in 2006. Remarkably, the 12 years of Batwoman comics have been filled with superhero adventures that have nothing to do with the protagonist's sex life. And right on Answers News' screen, they're showing Ruby Rose's announcement post to Instagram, where the actress who will be playing Batwoman ended by expressing, "Thank you, God." This news crew constantly laments that people don't give thanks to God, and then when someone does, they throw them under the bus. Maybe it's telling that Answers News jumped all over the two stories about LGBT inclusion in the DC universe, but ignored the actual relevant story to comic characters and religion, the reveal in Batman number 53 that Bruce Wayne has abandoned the Christian faith of his father.
And that takes us to Batman issue number 53, released last week. Bruce describes his faith to the room in great detail. He explains that his dad, Thomas Wayne, was deeply religious, and Bruce accepted his Christian upbringing until his parents were murdered by Joe Chill. He then admits that after their deaths, he would eventually put that faith into the Batman as a god. Now, this atheist reveal sent shockwaves through the DC fandom, with articles about Bruce Wayne's religious preference spreading through the internet like vines from poison ivy.
Arguably the highest profile superhero of all time, explicitly disavows Ken's religion, and he's worried about the sex lives of fringe characters.
Somebody else said here, I felt very uncomfortable when a man came into the women's Costco in San Diego. See, that sort of stuff is happening all across the nation. It is a safety
really
issue.
Is a safety issue.
I decided to try to find the statistics on this safety concern Georgia speaks of, but couldn't find any that backed up her fear that bathroom freedoms have led to assaults. In 2017, CNN reached out to 20 law enforcement agencies in states with anti-discrimination policies covering gender identity. None who answered reported any bathroom assaults after the policies took effect. Alternately, 70% of transgender and gender nonconforming Americans surveyed have been verbally or physically assaulted in public restrooms that don't match their gender identity. So who needs protection here? Are you really concerned about safety, Georgia?
All right, the secret history of Leviticus. Now, this is written by a liberal Bible scholar who's doing some major theological gymnastics, is what I would say, to try to get Leviticus 18 to justify homosexuality.
To get it to not say what it clearly says.
Well, what he's saying is an editor rewrote parts of Leviticus.
A much later editor.
While I found this article to make a few too many leaps for my own comfort level, the author is absolutely correct in saying that we have significant textual evidence that the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, were heavily edited and synthesized from multiple sources over its history. I'm going to be starting a series this fall where we talk about the history of the Bible, where we'll talk about this more in depth.
He doesn't believe Leviticus came from God through Moses. He believes it's just the work of men.
Unless we have proportional evidence to the contrary, this is the most rational position to take with any book.
Particularly if you go back and you look in Genesis, first of all, we find the origin of marriage there. Marriage is between one man and one woman for life. And second, when you read through, there's the account of Reuben, one of Jacob's sons, who sleeps with his father's concubine.
To be clear, a concubine is a mistress, someone the man is having sex with who is not his wife, though she may live in the same household.
And when it comes time for Jacob to give the blessing to all the sons, he doesn't bless Reuben. Why? He tells Reuben, it's because you defiled me. Reuben didn't do anything to his father per se. What he did was to his father's concubine. And yet Jacob claims you defiled me by that act because we're one flesh. Genesis 2:24 tells us when you get married, you're one flesh. So you do something to the wife, you're doing it to the husband as well.
So Answers in Genesis insists that the Bible defines marriage exclusively as one man and one woman, yet tells us that Reuben's father's mistress and Reuben's father's wife are equal in God's eyes. Which is it?
You need to read the Bible more because there's Romans 1, there's Genesis 1 that talks about God making a male and a female.
It just occurred to me that Answers in Genesis talk about the creation week animals being the original created kinds, and that all subsequent diversity of life is just adaptation that God included in the genome of the original creation. So, for example, Creation Week featured some original cat kind from which descended house cats and tigers, both straying far from the original creation. So, could it be that the original male and female humans similarly had built in a full spectrum of gender variation within the original created kind?
And people say, why can't you have all these different interpretations of Genesis, and you got this guy with this different interpretation of Leviticus? If you think about it, you can make the Bible say whatever you want it to say.
I have never agreed with Ken Ham more. Even if the Bible is inspired by God, it absolutely requires human interpretation, and no two humans are going to interpret it exactly alike. One evening on the Paulogia Discord server, I was playing a game where people could give me random truth claims, and I had to respond with Bible verses both for and against each proposition. It was not difficult, even for topics like video game strategy. You can make the Bible say anything you want it to say. What Answers in Genesis is selling is not the Word of God, but their flavor of interpretation of the Word of God, which is really no less man's word than any atheist you might meet. Any book that says everything ultimately says nothing.
Even if you go back, 70 years, this wasn't the issue that it is today. It's an issue in the last decade.
This issue, Token Millennial Avery is talking about, is gay marriage. In her eyes, marriage rights became an issue only in the last decade. As far as this panel knows, no gay people prior to 2008 wanted to get married. The population heard Katy Perry sing I Kissed a Girl and then suddenly had an epiphany. Hey, wouldn't it be neat if I could marry the same gender person I'm in love with? Avery may be correct in saying that it has been only a few decades where public pressure has forced the church to acknowledge this issue, but this has obviously been a discrimination issue for the entire history of marriage.
Somebody on here said all good comments from Avery in Georgia.
Ooh, nice.
I wonder if our social media team can ban them.
Speaking of the social media team, shout out to Nick at Answers in Genesis, who has been moderating the live chat since Answers News started streaming live on YouTube a few months back. He knows exactly who I am, but hasn't banned me yet. If you'd like to show some of the true believers that atheists can be calm and rational and caring, join us in the live chat sometime.
Ken is traveling, so that's why he's not here, and so...
We've all been assuming that Ken is doing speaking engagements, but I've heard rumor that he's moonlighting as a flight attendant.
And note that emergency exits are located up front, to your right and left, and along the left side of the room.
When science oversteps God. So this is written by a Catholic friar who is talking about all the different things science has brought into the world and how wonderful science is.
But then at the end of this article, he talks about people who hold the profoundly foolish belief that the Earth is only thousands of years old. Then that's a hit at creationists.
Yeah.
And he doesn't understand science. He doesn't understand there's a difference between historical science, beliefs about the past, and observational science that builds technology.
Yes.
Right, yeah, and he consistently talks about methodological naturalism.
Bodie, I'm going to need you to take a break from inventing fallacies and look up methodological naturalism. Methodological naturalism is merely the ground rule agreement among scientists that science is limited to the search for natural causes to explain natural phenomena. While supernatural explanations may be important, have merit, and individual scientists are welcome to believe in them, science itself cannot study the supernatural, and thus, supernatural explanations are set aside when doing science.
Saying how good and how great this is, for science. But does he realize naturalism is a religion that says there's no God, leave God out of it? Its nature is all that there is. That's what that is.
Bodie, do you realize that you were just talking about methodological naturalism? And now you are conflating it with philosophical naturalism? Philosophical naturalism is the belief that the natural world is all there is. Methodological naturalism says that while a supernatural realm may exist, the scientific method can't teach us about it.
So here he is appealing to this while at the same time trying to say that God exists, which naturalism says there isn't.
Yeah, and that's why he specifically said methodological naturalism. People of all faiths around the world practice methodological naturalism every day, then go home and do their devotional activity. It's how we get that operational science your team is so fond of. God isn't a helpful answer to extending Wi-Fi coverage, growing better crops, or curing diseases. We need methodological naturalism for that.
Because when you throw out Genesis, you throw out an Adam and Eve, you throw out original sin, what's the point in Jesus coming?
He has a point.
Christian Baker vindicated by SCOTUS back in court for not baking a gender transitioning cake. So this is the story of Jack Phillips. He just was vindicated by the Supreme Court for not wanting to make a cake for a gay wedding that was taking place. And so now someone else has charged him with not making a gender transitioning cake, and he is back in court yet again. So this man has a big old target on his back right now.
I'm no fan of this baker, but this is not cool, guys. Not only is he being subjected to the kind of behavior we want him to stop, but it will be more and more likely that these cases will be found in his favor due to further technicalities. There are enough actual acts of discrimination in the world that they don't need to be manufactured.
Canadian man sues hospital for offering euthanasia instead of care.
This is a potentially misleading headline, but let's see where Georgia goes with it.
So this man basically has more of a terminal illness, and he does require a lot of care. And he actually wants to move out of the hospital and into his home. And because it's socialized medicine, then the government would pay for his care regardless, whether he's in the hospital or at home. But what they've done is an option to him, have offered him euthanasia.
That's correct. For about 2 years now, medically assisted dying has been legal in Canada, and is something that the healthcare system is obligated to offer those who wish it and meet the necessary criteria. It may sound like it's in poor taste to offer it to someone who doesn't want it, but medical professionals can't be expected to have foreknowledge about who wants it, who doesn't, and who may become interested over time. But Georgia makes the important point here. The government is going to pay for his care regardless. There is nothing in the article to suggest that the patient is being offered euthanasia instead of care. It does sound like the man is unhappy with his particular care, but that's an entirely different issue.
Let's face it, it'd be cheaper and easier if he died, right?
That's why the government's looking at it. That's what happens when you let the government run your healthcare.
You know what else happens when you let the government run your healthcare? You have citizens like me who paid a lot of taxes all their lives. but then get cancer, spend years getting treated, and end up out of pocket just around $1,000 mainly in parking fees, instead of my entire family going bankrupt to pay for my care. And the government doesn't decide who lives and dies. Are we back to Trump's death panels now?
And that is not morally neutral. That makes assumptions about the value of human life, who gets to decide when it starts and when it ends. It's anti-biblical.
I don't fear death, but I am terrified of being forced to remain alive against my will. I'm happy to be a Canadian citizen.
Now we have a special video from Ken.
Well, hi everyone. I should say g'day, of course. Sorry I can't be at Answers News today. You're going to have to put up with Dr. Purdom and Bodie and, of course, Brian. Some people got really upset because I said purebreds are by and large degenerate mutants. Well, really, they are. You know what I came to the conclusion of? Many people, I'd say probably most people, don't seem to understand the concept of what a created kind means.
Is it perhaps because the definition of created kind seemed to be a more tightly guarded secret than the blend of herbs and spices at KFC? I'm starting to think that young Earth creationism is like Scientology, and that you have to rise through the ranks to AiG level 8 to eventually find out the true secret of what created kinds are.
Okay, you have a great day with Answers News.
This is the last episode, so we'll end it here. We're back to fall schedules, so look for more Ham and Egg News episodes, creation science videos, just a bite snippets, and a whole new Bible series coming soon. Thanks as always to my patrons, without whom my work here at Paulogia wouldn't be possible. If you're able to join them for as little as $1 a month, please check out the link in the description. You'll also find a link to the Paulogia Discord server and our Teespring store where you can get Ham and Egg News and former Christian merchandise. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment, tap the notification bell, and all the good YouTube things. It's great to be back. Thanks for watching. Until next time, later.